of the most difficult things for you when you're a big brother is that you can't ask anyone for money. Everyone comes to you for money. But when you, the big brother yourself, are not doing very well, it raises a lot of questions. So Nigeria is seen as big brother Africa, isn't it? But then Nigeria is having its own issues with a growing debt burden. Now, to ease this growing debt burden, the Tinubu administration has to address the country's declining revenue. Nigeria has the fourth lowest revenue to GDP ratio in the world. It has been reported that Nigeria's total debt in 7 years outweighed the revenue generated by the federal government by 13.2 trillion naira. Of course, a number of people have pointed fingers at the CBN violating its own law of going above the 5% of a previous budget to balance out the government. And a number of people have been wondering who is calling the CBN governor to account on that. And that is, oh, by the way, we can also tell you that unconfirmed reports may be suggesting that the CBN governor may have been arrested following that suspension that we told you earlier. Of course, you also saw on channelstv.com, our website. But that confirmation will come over time. Now, the Bola Tinubu administration inherited an economy that is grappling with inflation, chronic unemployment, extreme poverty, crumbling infrastructure, insecurity, among several other things. A good number of that is also obvious in the multidimensional poverty figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics, saying 133 million Nigerians out of a little over 200 million are living in multidimensional poverty. You need to really understand what that means. Let's have conversations around this morning. We have three gentlemen. Two of them are with us at this moment. Richard Mark Mbaram is Director General and Chief Executive Officer, Feed Nigeria Summit, Secretariat Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We also have with us Manuel Ijewere, who is Chairman, Best Foods Group and past President of ICANN. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Let me begin with you, Mr. Ijewere. So this is where we are, and a good number of people have been. Let's begin with that, which so many people have talked about concerning what the CBN governor or the CBN did, going above its limit of 5% of the previous budget to fund the federal government. What is your take on that, and what should have been done that has not been done?
From my personal opinion, I believe that that happened because it appears that under the law, the CBN appears to be accountable to nobody rather than the president. There is no institutional control, and it appears that the power of the CBN through its governor is so excessive that even those that should have had the moral suasion on it, like the various private banks in Nigeria, don't have that kind of situation. You have the Bankers Committee, the chairman of it is the governor of the central bank. They virtually issued decrees, and I think we need to go back to the law. If you are not accountable to anybody, you really cannot really check yourself. That's basically the big problem with the central bank. It is overpowerful. And once it gets the support of the head of state, he believes that it's above the law. Basically, that's my opinion on this.
Are you by any chance, well, not to use the word strongly, but for want of a better word, Mr. Ijewere, are you by any chance suggesting that the federal government under the previous leadership are culpable in this?
Absolutely. Oh, certainly. They have the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance should have an overriding control over the central bank itself. The central bank cannot run the Ministry of Finance, but in the last administration, I saw the Ministry of Finance was virtually emasculated.
Okay, well, Mr. Mbaram, the challenge is that of revenue. The federal government was, for want of a better word, hamstrung and needed bailing out, if I can use that term. That's why the CBN stepped in. The other option would have been to go out of the country to borrow more, isn't it? So, in that light, even though, as you said, there are those who will say the end justifies the means, but then, does it?
No, I mean, you want to be a bit, realistic to say that a governor of the central bank, like Dr. Jawara just said, would not dare to take on certain measures, inimical to the overall interest of the polity, if he does not see himself as being empowered by forces that would necessarily give him all of the protection that he requires to stay in power, in office. So that would set that tone. But if you're looking at the overall realities of the government, bailouts are utilized all over the world. Quantitative easing and terminologies of all of those of that sort all play into that into that ecosystem that you need to support an economy and try to ensure that inflation does not destroy the fundamentals of any given economy that you're looking at. But in the case of Nigeria, I think that the realities were better seen, or better seen from the standpoint of the fact that it was more of a very fabricated problem. I want to say that, because if you have a situation where you're paying so much on fuel subsidy, and you know that the bulk of your revenues are coming from the petroleum industry or sector, and you have a president setting out to be the petroleum minister from the get-go, all right? That means that you're saying, in effect, that everything around this ministry and around this sector, I take responsibility for it. And by that stroke of the pen, you have more or less created a situation where even whistleblowers who would ordinarily have been in a position to say, hey, there's something going on in the system. I've seen what goes on in the public sector. You wouldn't dare, question a permanent secretary's decision if you are an assistant director or a deputy director or even a director. It takes a lot of guts to do it, even as a director. So you see a situation where folks would want to toe the line because the buck ends at the president's table. So the responsibility for the economy being where it is on account of a consistent, deployment of resources, scarce resources, in some instances in which you have to borrow in order to fix the realities, should ordinarily rest, like you said, on, and Mr. Jawara confirmed it, on the president.
The reason I'm asking this question from you gentlemen is, if we don't know where we got it wrong, getting it right will be a problem. So in the light of this current reality that we have now, do you see that gap as a significant one in the revenue of the country? Let's start from there. Do you see that as a significant gap where the CBN cannot be curtailed by any other than the president, especially according to its own laws, that once you have the approval of the president, you can do whatever you want, while in fact, by the organogram, the CBN works with the Minister of Finance?
So again, we want to be down to earth with ourselves, because the Minister of Finance, who is supposed to be exercising control over the CBN governor, answers directly to the president. So if the president decides to empower the central bank governor there is absolutely nothing the Minister of Finance can do if she wants to remain in office. So sometimes...
Is it because it is or it is not the finance minister's role is or is not a statutory role?
No, that is the fact. It's not a statutory role. She serves, you know, at the pleasure of the president. And like I said, it would be appropriate for a person who has, will I say, credibility to say, I won't take this. I'd rather resign. When you do that, you indicate to the rest of the polity that there's something wrong somewhere. So I will point at Kachuku, for instance, who said, look, I can have this. I'm done. So it already tells you that in that ecosystem, there is a problem. You know, and that is a flag that the National Assembly ordinarily, if the setting were running properly, would key into and then take to scale.
Okay, let me ask Mr. Ejire the same question, but in a different way. Quite a few times, the Buhari government called the personnel in the entire security ecosystem of Nigeria, saying you guys should work together. And when they made that call the first time, I expected, look, hey, as a general speaking, he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, so everyone should just fall in line. But that meeting was called like one or two other times after the first one, meaning they didn't quite do what the president said. Do you think it's the same thing that happened in the finance sector, where there is discordance of sorts? The CBN not working in cahoot with the finance ministry, not in cahoot with the office of the auditor general, not in cahoot with the office of the accountant general. Do you think that's what happened?
Well, I really don't think so. I believe that the real issue was the powers that the law that set up the central bank gives to the governor of the central bank. It creates a situation where it's accountable to nobody. I was referring to the fact that our banks, our private banks in Nigeria, all 27 of them, have some of the best chief executives you can find anywhere in the world, very intelligent people. But the power of the central bank is so much that it can withdraw the license of any of those banks for any reason. And they are so frightened that when they go to the meetings, they virtually listen to instructions from the central bank and have few inputs. And I think that's where the problem comes from. It's not the president of Nigeria, yes, has some responsibility in this. And it's also possible that he does not really fully understand. He did not really fully understand what it is all about. He was not elected to be the governor of the central bank. He was elected to govern Nigeria, to manage Nigeria as a company. And he had people who were to hold various sectors of the economy. And I want to really come up again to the issue, because what we're talking about here is revenue generation. And I think a lot of it, very little of it, depends on the central bank. Central bank is only a bank. Central bank is not a revenue generation organization. And therefore, they will hardly be held responsible for lack of revenue generation, like was rightly pointed out. Revenue generation to GDP is one of the lowest in the world. I think this is something that is far wider than the central bank itself.
Well, I agree with you, Sejure. The reason for bringing that up is in the light of recent developments, and I'm just wondering how one can transit from that into this, conversation that we're having now. The reason is this. So we're talking about revenue, but then some of the policies that will encourage that revenue will come from the finance industry, headed by the finance minister and working with the CBN. CBN also has to come up with policies, fiscal policies, monetary policy, and all of those things. That's in the light of the conversation. And so how significant would you say, well, Mr.
I wanted to just put things in perspective. You see, you just had a CBN governor who has been asked to go on suspension. He led a CBN that basically was involved in everything, including agriculture. I mean, we were complaining at the time as to the fact that the Anchor Borrowers program, for instance, should be driven from the agriculture ministry. That's where you have the experts. That's where you have individuals who can readily, answer to realities that present themselves in the course of implementation.
Let me ask Mr. Ajowi, do you agree with that, or you think it was just something that needed to happen?
I think I agree with Richard very much, but I will quickly add that the idea of the Anchor Borrower Scheme was a beautiful idea. It's the execution that was the problem.
That's right.
Central Bank was not the body to execute it. They should have worked in conformity or in consonance with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, where, like Richard said, where the experts resided. And I believe that was the real problem that existed there. Central Bank overreached itself by taking it up all by itself.
So let me ask you pointedly, Mr. Ajowi, what are the issues bedeviling Nigeria's revenue challenge, and what needs to be done?
It is bottom up. First, the Nigerian Constitution has 3 tiers of government. You have the local government, the state, and the federal. The local government is to be the one nearest to the grassroots, and is supposed to put in place those laws that will encourage these people to generate income. By generating income, you can tax those incomes. The state government is supposed to put all its local governments together, make laws that will create activities, economic activities, that will generate revenue again and tax those revenues. The federal government's revenue generation comes mainly from the corporate organizations, not from the individuals. The local government and the state governments rely on the individuals. So enrich your individuals in your local government, in your states, you get more money. At the federal level, enrich the companies and the corporate organizations, you will get more revenue. That is the basic and fundamental issue here. What policies that are put in place, frighten investment. Investments bring wealth, but if you frighten the people and make those laws where you tax people even before they get the income, they are discouraged. That's what happens. I give an example, simple, and I'm glad that Richard and I also operate in the agricultural space. We have calculated that a trailer coming from Kano to Lagos, has to face about 34 checkpoints along the road before arriving in Lagos. What are the taxes? What income has the driver earned? What the tomato is carrying? He's not even the owner. He pays all along. There's damage to it. These are little grassroots things that destroy our own country. The other one is those people who are at the checkpoints. Who are they? Some of them are local government. Some of them are federal officers, military people, policemen, customs. You also have the state, interstate, as if you are going from one country to the other where people have to pay duty. These are issues that are helping to discourage investments in Nigeria, and these have to be tackled from the grassroots. We need to work it from bottom up, not start from the top.
Okay.
A lot of problems are arising because we are not looking deeply at these. If we want to create revenue, we create wealth. You don't tax poor people because they have nothing to pay tax with.
Is this a question of quick ones, Mr. Ajowi? Is it a question of policy or is just execution?
It's impunity. Impunity in the sense that you can do whatever you like.
All right.
The laws are clear.
Okay.
The tax laws are absolutely clear. Just that people who even understand the law deliberately ignore the law and nothing happens to them. That's impunity.
Interesting. Well, Mr. Baram,
yes.
Let's look at this per sector.
Yeah.
Which sector, I mean, hitherto, we've talked about the petroleum sector largely, and many say that's the cash cow of the country as at now. Over time, we have also seen the services industry also play a significant role. Perhaps we can also say that the digital economy of Nigeria is also getting, more vibrant. But that's not to say that agriculture is in any way in the back burner, which has worked for us before now. If we are to focus or prioritize as a nation, and maybe primary, secondary, tertiary, sources of income, because we are talking about de-emphasizing petroleum now, how should we be looking at it?
Yeah, I think Mr. Jerry has a very valid point from bottom up. But I think, too, that you want to look at things from a macro perspective. The movement has got to be seen from the top. Leadership needs to take responsibility, and so policy must dedicatedly point to a direction which the rest of the economy will tag onto or latch onto. I say that to say this. The president has just talked about the subsidy issue and taken it on frontally. And he said very clearly, there's no money. And it's true. We are way, way, way in the red. In fact, I was speaking with someone and he said, look, I said, we have retrogressed. He said, no, we are in a ditch. We need to first claw ourselves out of the ditch and then decide whether we want to go forward or backwards.
Wow.
It's that bad. So you want to have money in the first place to run a government and a country. So there is no basis for borrowing in order to satisfy this mammoth waste. So you take it head on. There are concerns about the cushion effect and all of that, but fundamentally, that was the right decision because that frees up resources.
Well, you've not answered my question.
I'm going there.
Well, I know that you will, but let me quickly bring on Dr. Monday Michaels Ashibogu, who's a policy development expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're talking about boosting Nigeria's revenue, and apparently the federal government, the president, has been taking some action, one of which is, first of all, cut off what a number of people have called a cancer of subsidy. How significant is that for you in cutting excesses or cutting waste?
Well, I'm not sure about the waste for now, but what I'm certain about is that you've been able to shore up some funds, which will save the government for the next 3 months. I knew that without removing that subsidy, I'm sure the government would not have been able to pay salaries for June. That was a given certainty because our debt to revenue was clocking close to 80%. And what it means is that whatever will be left is for recurrent expenditure. You don't have any funds for any capital expenditure right now as we speak. And any government that is desirous of surviving would look at the places where you know that there's a monster that exists and cut off the head. One is subsidy. The first thing you do is to remove it. We'll have the pangs will be there. You'll feel the impact. We've been shouting about this for the past 10 years. I became very unpopular about this position I took even here years ago when I said, look, there's no need saying anything about adjustments of prices or tweaking these things. We are even also adjusting prices. When you remove subsidy, you allow people to determine prices. Today we are having prices also still be determined. So what we've just done is price adjustments for now. So we're just taking care of the import cost by yanking off that import cost and leaving it at the hand of the consumer. We've not totally removed subsidy. If you remove top subsidy, the fuel stations and those who are importing will be at liberty to sell at whatever price that they deem fit.
Is that why? Because I began by talking about the fact that some fuel stations still have long queues. Is that the reason?
Well, it's a function of choice. Some are selling at prices that people find comfortable to buy with, so you have longer queues there, and some stations you don't find any queues at all, given the price, and also the integrity of that fueling station as well. Some have been notorious for adjusting their pump meters, so no matter what you say, people have already formed that perception about them, so you're not likely to see anyone there. But if you go around Lagos today, you'll find some fuel stations having longer queues than the others and the same price.
Okay, let me ask you this, and then I'll begin to take it around. And gentlemen, maybe all of us will be able to talk about this. If we boost revenue, let me be more positive. When we boost revenue, it is expected that, we'll have more money to be able to work with. But then there is also the leakages. For me, the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation is the chief leakage supervisor. Because when that report comes from the audit report comes every year, we see leaks or uncompleted transactions or whatever it is that you want to call it, or unaccounted for funds in trillions. So in terms of boosting revenue, how do we begin the process of even blocking the leakages? Because right now we have very little coming into the basket and it's leaking. If more comes into the basket without blocking the leakages, the leaks will be heavier. Don't you think so?
Okay, let me draw this analogy. We're running a system of children who have been groomed and spoiled as brats. That's why you have leakages. A child who does not know how money is made and the conscious effort the parents have taken to conserve such funds to which he's enjoying that luxury would not know how to maintain that. And that's why everyone who comes into the system, particularly in public service, feels that this money is just something everybody could just latch onto and peel off. And so the leakage will always exist because we will create a system that makes it conducive for leakages to exist. And to some extent, the leakages also have a cushioning effect, because if there were no leakages and people have to go through this route of some form of indiscipline in public service, people will be up in arms against them. So there are beneficiaries of a long chain from these leakages. So what you need to look at is, if you need to also block the leakages, you must create the opportunities to where beneficiaries of these leakages who have either have nothing to do, have something gainfully to do. Now, how do you account for your public service workers? The percentage, we've talked about this Orosei report, we've talked about different reports that have been coming in. You want to fuse, you want to merge, and government, as we speak today, is still employing.
Okay, let me ask, it's like you just dropped a cliffhanger there. Well, Mr. Jerry, if we boost revenue without blocking leakages, have we done anything?
Not much. Not much. You know this kind of situation we have in our country. The real problem first comes from the leadership. If the leadership has a focus, it relates to the people. It is transparent in everything it does. It presents it to the people. It explains to the people. The people will better understand the situation, and in that kind of environment, those various leakages will disappear. You can only thrive with these leakages when there is secrecy, when there is opaqueness in governance. So, very many of us believe that once a person has been appointed into an office, he becomes a demigod, and therefore nobody can ask him. We have not built up mentality of our people that these are servants of the people. They must be accountable. We, you and I, as we sit here, are equally guilty. More guilty than those people who are less privileged to come on television and speak. We allow it to happen. Our friends are there, we don't call them to order. So that is basically, so bringing in more money just puts more money into the pockets of people. Right, you started off by talking about the National Assembly. See how much they are earning. We all know how much they are earning. How much does the common man earn? What is rationale, for God's sake, behind that? What have we done? We know this truth. So the more revenue you bring in, the more it goes into a few pockets, the faster Maitama and Lekki will grow. these are the issues that we are saying here.
Okay.
Unless we start the mentality of questioning people, holding them accountable, we are not. We must put things in place. And we thank God we have a new leadership coming in. They need to reorientate themselves, whether they want Nigeria to keep going down, like Richard said, into that deep hole, or climb out of it. And when we climb out of it, the right guys decide what direction we want to go. I believe that they must take that decision now. I don't want to spend too much energy talking about what has happened in the past, but where should we be going to turn Nigeria around? Nigeria is a great, great nation. Absolutely. And God was very kind to give it to us.
Well, thank you for that one. Talking about Nigeria, such pride gives me a lot of euphoria. Well, Mr. Maram, in terms of blocking the leakages, I know a number of people have an experience or have experiences with private sector practitioners, corporate organizations, that everything is digitized, right? From sending in your proposal to going through whoever it is going to go through to a point of approval, everything is digitized. You have quoted with the public service a bit before. Do you see that as possible and workable or practicable in this current Nigeria? I know that the vice president, the former vice president, Professor Osinbajo, when he came into office, it's one of the first few things he was talking about, you know, reforming the public sector and all of that. Do you think digitizing the system will help?
Yeah, I mean, the colleague on the other side, Dr. Ashibogu, made a point. You've got to run government as a business even, okay, and make a business case to those who are in themselves operating inimically to the success that you want to achieve. That's what makes the private sector tick. The private sector doesn't want to glory or postulate about the problem. It puts forward a solution and thereby creates value which it benefits from. So coming to your question, the key thing is basically reorientating the civil service. First and foremost, look, if we clean up this place, we will have more resources to give to you, even as, you know, public servants. We will be able to provide you this. That's the reason why I have a very good feeling about someone saying, look, I'm taking away the subsidy thing, all right? Because that confers responsibility on him. He's taking responsibility to run the setting appropriately. If you tax me in a manner that creates a concern about the fact that revenue is leaving me, I would be more interested in seeing what you're doing with those resources. But I was trying to make this point that you can't tax a man for resources that he does not generate, isn't it? So that makes you happy to hear that you're talking now about, you know, Electricity Act. That is the key. Businesses can provide electricity, they can provide the resources to ensure that settings, take for instance a local government, take for instance a state, can be properly structured and fed power.
That's another conversation altogether.
No, it is, but it saves resources. Because right now, the man who is busy spending money on petrol to power his generator will not complain anymore. He is structured. He knows how to plan his business. The mom and pop businesses, and we're talking revenue generation, the mom and pop businesses would now begin to thrive. Then you can tax them. All right? Not just that. If you realize that kerosene and diesel are not subsidized as we speak. Kerosene is the petrol, the oil, the crude oil. Domestic petrol. I think that's better. Yeah, for the poor. That is their own petrol, but it's not subsidized. Diesel is industry's own petrol. It's not subsidized. So what are we talking about? That means the economy itself is undermining itself from a policy standpoint. So in a nutshell, you have got to approach this. Statecraft is not a walk in the park.
You know, the reason I've been asking about, all those, policies, electricity and all those things are important. But if we don't know what the challenges are, That's the reason that these questions are being asked along the line of leakages and all, because if you have a leaking pocket, no matter how much money you put into it, it's going to leak right out. So while government is making efforts to increase its revenue, let's watch where and how it is losing that revenue. That's the whole
The structures are there to block the leakages, but the people that are in the positions to implement those or the institutional structure is in place, but the people that should trigger it in themselves they don't see themselves benefiting from doing that directly.
Thank you. That it comes to the question that Dr. Shibogu mentioned the other time, and you can speak to it, that, you know, those who are benefiting from the rot, if we can use the word, will not want the benefits to just be cut off. So he mentioned something about incentivizing the people in a way that they don't feel a complete sense of loss. Now, I know that there is this thing with the public sector that they can do agriculture, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Now, that's, from what I understand,
the one business that the public servants can do.
Do you see a policy of government that can help the public service look at public servants look at agriculture as a more profitable, more legitimate fallback, as opposed to the leaks that we have?
So at the end of the day, you will still come to the point where the man will be looking at whether his involvement in agriculture will make sense to him in any way. That's why you have the youth of the country. You keep saying they should come back, go to agriculture, you know, we should return to agriculture and all of that. They are just ignoring you completely because they know you're making very little sense to them in practical terms. And we've got to understand that the people watch the leaders. You see, by the time you can see that the person is paying lip service to this undertaking, then you choose to do something else. Why do you think that we have this number of our productive demography leaving the shores of this country? And so I found it very ridiculous for someone to say, oh, we're going to be coming up with a law to restrict movement. From time immemorial, it is opportunity that informs migration, or the perception of it. Okay. All right? If you are in a setting where everything works against you, you're producing your power, you're producing your water, you're basically even almost creating your roads. All right? You're subsidizing the government, and then you're taxed on that. It will make you gravitate in a different direction, ordinarily.
I know that when Mr. Ejewere was talking about the number of taxes that small businesses go around with the other time, he mentioned 34 thereabout, and you said it was 60-something.
Actually, I'm sure Mr. Ejewere lost the count. Perhaps he has not had a delivery in the last 2 weeks. I know he does bulk, but right now there are 60 from between Kano and Lagos. It's 68.
68 what?
Checkpoints. These are checkpoints from the army, civil defense, the police, produce, local governments. Some are communities. Because
how many toll gates do we have in this line?
We're not talking about toll gates.
No, how many do we have? Any
checkpoints that the returns on those checkpoints do not go to government coffers. And I can tell you, if you need to guarantee your product or the service you want to move through these routes, you should pay. So that's just for hauling produce.
I asked a question, Dr. Shibogu. In the light of, well, I'm coming to you, Mr. Ejewere, so now you know that the number has doubled. But in the light of the fact that most of the people we are talking in this line who have to pay these 68 bills that are not factored into the
cost, not factored into your taxes, it's not factored into the wages, it's not factored into levies by councils.
Okay, we'll come into that.
You have 28 regulatory issues to meet as an SME.
Then are micro, small, and medium enterprise? In fact, I understand that there is now nano, micro, small, and medium enterprises. How profitable is it for them to work and help the government of the federation or the states boost revenue?
Okay, let's look at this. Our tax basket is between 6 to 8% in terms of our contribution to GDP. And you want to improve on the numbers, and you're not improving on capacities of nanos. You're not improving on incentives or creating opportunities that can make it flexible. You know, we work in silos when we talk about policy developments at public sector level. That's the problem we have. You have Ministry of Agriculture doing something, CBN is doing something. You have harmony is always the issue. And I know the office of the then Vice President made an effort towards this presidential ease of doing business. And we had customs going all its way to do something else different from what, you know, they have to be whipped into line. They work for like a month or two with you. They move out again to do what they feel is appropriate. And they're right. They are protected also by their laws that establishes them. But the thing is, because we create rules and regulations that allows government, ministries, departments, and agencies to operate in silos, you will have people working at cross purposes. I'll give you an example. You have NCC Act, you have NIDA Act, then today you also have the Data Protection Agency Act. And some of them are encroaching into the turf of NCC. Now, if you want to encourage digital economy, you want to encourage digital finance, you want to encourage businesses within that digital space, how many regulators do you need exactly? So you are talking to NIDA, you are talking to data protection, and every agency you're talking to that will offer you support will ask you to pay one form of levy or the other. If you get to NCC, there's one class license, there's one levy, there's one that you would pay. You get to NIDA, you would pay one. Then you come to NOTAP, technology acquisitions, you pay. Now, for someone who is in the fintech space, you have about 6 to 7 different forms of levies and licenses you need to obtain just within the Communications and Digital Economy Ministry. You're not talking about finance. You're not talking about the council where you operate, the local council where you operate. You're not talking about the area boys who is downstairs looking after your vehicle.
And you're not even talking about the other statutory ones like the ETF, NSITF.
Good. So you see, these things are a whole gamut that gives this room for leakages. Now, if you need to stem these leakages, you say, okay, now for the area boy, where am I going to place him? Right? To make him useful. He generates revenue for himself and also can pay tax. For these agencies that are busy bringing out one levy after the other, how do you harmonize this? And have you even thought of what exactly I do and how I generate my money? You know, in fact, sometimes it is a crime to be a business in Nigeria.
It is. Well,
because the moment you put your signage, you have different kinds of personalities knocking at your door. So companies now, to play safe, avoid even putting signages. So the truth is, you need to look at how you can create a rule that is seamless from council to the national level. We also have a constitutional challenge too. Mind you that each level of government has its level of autonomy and has rights to make rules and regulations for itself. Well, that's another challenge we have.
Well, let me go to Mr. Ejewere. Well, a number of issues have been raised. By the way, a quick update on the arrest of the CBN governor, former CBN governor that we talked about the other time. Well, while it is being reported, but the spokesman of the DSS says he cannot confirm as at now. I guess we'll bring you that later on. Murtala Raji says on the suspension of the CBN governor, says it's much expected considering what Nigerians went through, especially a few days to the election due to policies introduced. As regards Chief Afe Babalola's suggestions on cutting cost of governance, I don't see the House of Reps cutting their monthly salaries, neither that of the executive or the state government. Well, Mr. Ejewere, you spoke to that the other time. Now, he said, though achieving 0.2 above will have a great impact on the cost of governance, it seems to be a tough one to achieve. Now, speaking about revenue generation, Murtala Raji says, apart from oil revenue, what happens to other revenue sources like gold, Ajaokuta steel mill that has been abandoned for years? Government should not consider increasing taxes as a means of increasing revenue. Let me come to you right quick, Mr. Ejewere. a number of issues. One of the issues that have been raised by Dr. Ashibogu here is that ministries, departments, and agencies seem to work in silos in the various industries where they are. As at, I think, 2 years ago, this report, a report ascribing, crediting the DG of Budget Office, saying that Nigeria has 1,484 ministries, departments, and agencies and corporations, about 900 and something MDAs, and about 543 or thereabout corporations of the federal government. That's just for the federal government, and then for the states. Now, the assumption that Dr. Ashibogu is making here is that a good number of these agencies that are supposed to be working together are working in silos. Now, we have quite a number of industries all over the place, the federal level, state level, local government level, and all of that. How do you see us going about harmonizing these ecosystems so that they can work together, as opposed to working to shut down or frustrate the businesses that are supposed to be helping generate the revenue that the federal government needs? I know you may want to refer to that double taxation that you referenced the other time.
The first thing is we need to know that the problems we have in Nigeria have at various times in our history been researched and worked upon. But successive governments or governments that come thereafter seem to ignore what has been done in the past. If you go into the Oransayo report, it's one of the most comprehensive reports Nigeria has ever written on how to harmonize the work of all the various ministries and MDAs. It's a beautiful report, if only it could be implemented. The issue raised by Dr. Ashibogu will be addressed. You remove those silos. Go back to that report. It's a fantastic report. It took a long time to do, and the people who put it together, I'm very proud of it. This is an asset for Nigeria. So we have a lot of solutions to our problems. It is the willpower. It is the determination to go to do right. That's why I said we have an opportunity to restart right now, starting from the governor of the state. Let him have a covenant with his people and say, from now on, we shall do things different. My convoy that used to have about 15, 20 cars will now have 2 or 3 cars. From now on, this should happen, this will happen. You will see the people will rise to support it and become more proactive with the government. You talked about digitalization. It's a fantastic thing, but it's not being used because people don't have confidence. You have a lot of things that are happening. I'm sorry to bring this up, like the issue that happened about Sheikh Kuti, Kuti. It was captured on somebody's cell phone, and it went wide, and something was done about it. So technology has not been used because people don't have the confidence that it will be used. Okay. So I am asking that our leaders must rise up now in this great opportunity and say, I have covenant with my people. Let us collectively change our country.
Okay.
The things we have done in the past, let it remain in the past.
Mr. Mbaram, yes, we are coasting home.
I get you.
So speak to us about the role that the local governments can play in all of this. I think it was Mr. Ajuri that talked about bottom up, and you corroborated it. You are in the agricultural business largely. What are we missing at that level? How can we cut down on the losses of the produce from the local government areas? I know that Dr. Ashibogu has talked about 68 bills that you have to pay that are not factored into production. What can we do at that level?
So the third level of governance in the country, it is, for me, the closest to the people, and the epicenter where the focus of development should be directed. The bulk of the people that we talk about, the 133 million who are in multidimensional poverty, are basically rural dwellers. 75, if not more, percentage of them are rural dwellers. So the rural setting for us, I take Dr. Adeshina's statement, is just cleavages of misery that we have there. So local governments are really, really so important. It is at the local government that you have the land situated, even though the governor owns the allodial title. And it is the land that you largely require for agricultural purposes. So the power of the local government, or the capacity of the local government to influence development, particularly around revenue generation and empowering of the people, is profound. But structurally speaking, within the Nigerian state's ground norm, the local government is considered a bastard, so to speak. The local government is managed at the whims and caprices of the executive governors of the states. And so the local government ordinarily should be protected. And it's...
How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it has to be from a legislative standpoint that we've got to be...
back to constitutional review?
Yes, a constitutional review.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
Dr. Ashibogo, in closing, micro, small, and medium enterprises, how do we help them balance out?
Okay, I was going to talk about opportunities, right, and the quality of opportunities we create. And I listened to Mr. Jewelry. You know, he's also an accountant, for your information. So, and
he is the past president of ICANN.
So that will
for your information.
That will also tell you that he's well grounded in every issue that we're talking about now. But the thing is, quality of opportunities that will create in this political dispensation is very important. You know, for some governors, they believe that convoy of 70 cars, they've created jobs for about 200 or 300 people. So that's the kind of opportunities you may see coming up, and that's the reason why we are worried that we do not have the quality of opportunities that will come, and those people just have this hand-to-mouth mentality, cap in hand at all times. These are the things we're trying. We're looking at qualitative opportunities, sustainable opportunities. I don't have to come back to you again. You know, the moment I have this opportunity, I can put my feet on the ground. You're getting people out of vulnerable situations. Now, multidimensional poverty, it's not just is no longer the exclusive purview of rural communities now. It's encroached into urban areas. You could see the level of how people now live their lives, even as tenants.
Help me address this in 30 seconds if you can.
Yes.
This 68 unbudgeted bills,
yes,
that the traders have to pay from Kano to Lagos, and that's just one. I'm paying for it.
Yeah.
How do we cut down on that? How do we reduce those costs?
I think it's also a dilemma between the chicken and the egg. Now you remove the checkpoints, the bandits are back, right? And you do not put. So that's another dilemma. So the thing is,
I think you have said enough.
But you don't throw people to the checkpoints without actually taking care of them. I've seen some policemen who have been in checkpoints in Plateau State for the past 6 months. They were transferred from Osun State. Even the uniform would speak in volumes. So you need to actually ask yourself what kind of incentives these men who are on the road have been given to stay there and risk their lives for you. So that would be one of the things that can scale down the level of taxing.
So essentially you're saying we scale up security at those levels. Scale
up also the opportunities. And define the quality of opportunities you're giving to people.
Okay.
Not just cap in hand, we just come every day for a morsel of bread, and tomorrow we are back.
Well, clearly you're saying to the federal government and the states that you guys, you don't even know the scale of problems that you have to contend with.
That's the point.
Well, we have to thank you very much, gentlemen, because it's the beginning of conversations. The tangent to which we have taken this conversation isn't the normal way of asking questions about raising revenue, but dealing with the issues that can make the revenue raised relevant. We have to thank you very much, Richard Markumbaram, Director General, CEO, Feed Nigeria Summit, Secretariat in Abuja. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Monde Michaels Ashibogo, Policy Development Expert. He is a past spokesperson of the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you for your time this morning. As well as Mr. Emmanuel Ijewere, Chairman Best Foods Group, and also past President of ICANN. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate your time today.
Thank you.